Welcome back to Catalyst University. My name is Kevin Tokoph, and in this video, we're going to be talking all about gaze instability and hypofunctions. We're going to talk about the theory, we're going to talk about how you test it, and we're going to talk about how you treat it. And we're going to take it one step at a time, and hopefully this will be a nice master class for you. And after you learn the things from this video, you'll be able to treat this in the clinic tomorrow. So let's begin by looking at what is the vestibular ocular reflex, or the VOR. Simply put, the VOR, or the vestibular ocular reflex, is an innate reflex that we all have that allows us to keep gaze stability, meaning keeping your eyes both simultaneously and equivalently focused on a single point as our head moves in space. So for example, I'm going to keep my eyes, I should say, fixed on this little light on my phone. And as I rotate my head one way, towards the right, my eyes have to rotate left essentially to keep my gaze focused on that object. If I go towards the left, my eyes have to rotate right to keep my gaze focused on that object. And I can play the same game going up and down. I can tilt my head up, the eyes have to tilt down. I can tilt my head down, the eyes have to tilt up, and any combination of movements, I'm able to maintain gaze stability on that object without becoming symptomatic, right? That's the whole point of the VOR. Now, how does the VOR work exactly? Well, in this example, this is involving what is overall left head or neck rotation. So when I perform left head rotation, my eyes have to move right to keep my gaze focused on that object. So left head rotation is what we're going to focus on in this little segment. So when the head is rotated left, so you have a vestibular apparatus in both inner ears. Now, the more excruciating details of all the nuclei that this goes through, I have another video on my channel where I discuss that. I'll be sure to put that video in a link in the comment section of this video, but we're going to gloss over that for now and just basically say that particular extraocular eye muscles have to activate in a certain sequence to be able to maintain that gaze stability. So when I rotate my head left, let's think about this. The left eye and the right eye both have to rotate right, relatively speaking. For the right eye to rotate right, it would have to be activation of the lateral rectus muscle there and inhibition of the medial rectus muscle. For the left eye to rotate right, it would have to be activation of the medial rectus muscle, inhibition of the lateral rectus muscle. And you can play that same game going up or down, rotate in the opposite direction, whatever it is. The whole idea here is that through detection of movement of fluid in the canals in the inner ear, one vestibular apparatus gets inhibited. That's on the side you're rotating your head toward. The other one gets excited, and you have certain patterns of extraocular eye muscles that activate to keep your gaze focused on a single point. And that includes when the head's moving independently. It includes when the whole body is moving. But in either case, the head is having net movement in space. We have to maintain gaze stability, and the vestibular ocular reflex is responsible for that. So that's, in brief, the mechanism of that. If you want the grueling details, be sure to check out the link that's posted in the comment section of this video. So I'm going to be testing your VOR. This is a reflex where you are going to keep your eyes fixed on the bridge of my nose here between my eyes. And I'm going to tilt your head forward slightly, and then I'm going to rotate your head slowly to your right and left, back and forth. Keep your eyes fixed on my nose. Now I'm going to do the same thing vertically. I'm going to tilt your head up and down. Keep your eyes fixed on my nose. Now, an abnormal VOR test would be indicated by the inability of the patient's eyes to maintain that gaze stability on the practitioner's nose while their head is being passively rotated. And what you might see are something called interruptive saccades. So obviously, as the patient's head is being guided into rotation, Their eyes should always be moving in the opposite direction to maintain gaze stability. What you might see, instead of the eyes moving cleanly and smoothly like this, is as they're moving, there might be these interruptive saccades. It may occur throughout the motion. It can also occur up and down. Or what it might be is it's good on one side, and as you cross midline, it jumps. Okay, so it doesn't have to be throughout the whole range. It could just be in one portion of the range. Oftentimes, if that's the case, it is when crossing midline, whether it's up or down. And understand that this may be associated with reproduction of familiar dizziness-related symptoms. Technically, that does not constitute an abnormal test, but it definitely is something to watch out for. Okay, it could indicate something else, just something to keep on the radar. An abnormal test is simply inability to maintain that gaze stability, or where the eyes do not move cleanly and smoothly. There's interruptive saccades at any point during that range of motion. In terms of decision making, anyone with an abnormal VOR should be assessed for an underlying neurological condition and or treated with gaze stabilization exercises, which we're going to get to towards the end of the video when we talk about treatment. Now, when it comes to assessing for an underlying neurological condition, if you have a patient that had a history of a stroke, and assuming they're not displaying current stroke signs like facial droop, dysphagia, dysarthria, anything like that, the stroke probably explains the impaired VOR. So I'm not really super concerned about that. I might proceed directly to treatment. If the person has a history of MS, if they have cerebral palsy, things like that, maybe I'm not as concerned about that because there is something there that explains it. But if the person does not have a diagnosed neurological condition and they have other things such as upper motor neuron signs that kind of go along with this, then maybe I refer them to neurology to get assessed for that. If it seems like something that's not rapidly worsening, I might continue to treat them. Maybe we do some gaze stabilization exercises. But if it's something that is rapidly worsening, then I'm probably just going to refer them to neurology and not proceed with treatment. If they just happen to have an isolated abnormal VOR, there's nothing suggesting an underlying neurological condition, no neurosigns, no upper motor neuron signs, anything like that. Maybe they just have an idiopathic gaze stability deficit and we just need to treat it. So in that case, I'll proceed directly to treatment. Now I'm going to do a variation of what we previously did, where instead of rotating your head slowly, I'm going to just quickly rotate your head to your left to start, and you keep your eyes fixed on my nose. So I'm going to go to your left first. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. I'm going to come back to center, and then I'm going to do the same thing to your right. I'll do one more in each direction. And then to the right. Now, a positive head thrust test would be indicated by a delay in the patient's eyes regaining focus on the practitioner's nose after the rotation. This delay is known as a corrective saccade. So when this test is negative on each side, you would essentially see this. I rotate my head left, eyes instantaneously rotate right to maintain gaze stability. I quickly rotate the patient's head right, eyes rotate left to maintain that gaze stability on the practitioner's nose or whatever the target is. But let's suppose I have a positive head thrust test on the right side. So I do the head rotation left, negative, eyes instantly move back. Maintain focus on the practitioner's nose. But when I rotate right quickly, and I'm going to exaggerate the delay so you get the idea, I rotate quickly right, the eyes do not instantaneously move back. There's a delay on that, okay? That delay indicates a positive test. And whatever side the head was rotated towards, that is the affected side with the positive test. So if you have it when the head is rotated right, that means the right inner ear is affected. And so we would term that a right-sided hypofunction. Now I just showed you VOR testing and head thrust test. When somebody has an abnormal VOR, it's normally pointing to something in the central realm, maybe an underlying neurological condition. It could be a central vestibular deficit, so you might see some other central tests being positive in your oculomotor exam. Maybe it's from a migraine. That's not unheard of to produce some gaze instability. Whatever it is, it's usually more central / ocular. Now, if somebody comes in and presents with a positive head thrust test, that is a hypofunction, sometimes referred to as a peripheral vestibular deficit. And I want to briefly talk about some of the common conditions that can result in a hypofunction. So let's say you have somebody that comes in with a positive head thrust test, and they recently had an upper respiratory infection that preceded the dizziness. Well, that is starting to get me more thinking about labyrinthitis, especially when they've got a more continuous dizziness, continuous vertigo, and hearing loss. And a lot of times the hearing loss is more high-pitched hearing loss rather than low-pitched. But hearing loss, more continuous vertigo, upper respiratory infection preceding it, very likely to be labyrinthitis, which generally speaking is where the bony labyrinth, those semicircular canals of the inner ear, those have gotten inflammation. If they've got labyrinthitis, I might send them to an ENT doctor to get to the underlying cause of that. Maybe there's some medication they can give them to calm that inflammation down. And then after the inflammation is down, then we can get them back into physical therapy because they're likely going to have some residual effects from that we can retrain up with the VOR times 1 exercise and other things that, again, we'll talk about towards the end of the video. Now, these other two conditions, Meniere's disease and vestibular neuritis, generally do not have an upper respiratory infection preceding them. So if the person has absence of an upper respiratory infection, it strongly rules up these two and rules down labyrinthitis. Now, the first of these, vestibular neuritis, differs from Meniere's disease in the sense that there's no hearing loss. So no upper respiratory infection, no hearing loss, just periodic vertigo. Again, more likely to be a neuritis situation. But when the person also does not have an upper respiratory infection preceding it, but they do have hearing loss, usually more high-pitched hearing loss, and they have that dizziness, that starts to say to me Meniere's disease. Now, particularly with labyrinthitis and Meniere's disease, these are conditions that tend to be associated with a really bad episode. Now, labyrinthitis, there's going to be that initial really bad episode, and then you might have lingering effects afterward. Meniere's disease is episodic. You're going to deal with this throughout your life. It doesn't usually go away totally. Usually manage it in a combination of medically, with medications, things like that, lifestyle changes, particularly with diet. But generally speaking, when you're having that acute episode, a really bad episode where it's flared, particularly Meniere's disease, that's not when you want to do these exercises. You want to wait for that acute episode to go down to where symptoms are minimal before you start doing gaze stabilization exercises. And then there's idiopathic hypofunctions that don't seem to fit into any one of these three categories. There's no hearing loss. There's no history of an upper respiratory infection. There's nothing to explain why the hypofunction would have come in. They just come in, they present with a positive head thrust test, you treat them with gaze stability exercises, and they get better. And great, they got better. But there's not really any reason why it should have developed. It just seemed to happen. It's idiopathic. Another cause of hypofunctions is having in the past taken what we call an ototoxic medication. Ototoxic, oto means ear, toxic is toxic, and these ototoxic medications are largely antibiotics, some of which you can see listed here. These medications damage the hair cells of the inner ear, and when you damage those hair cells, the inner ear no longer functions as it should, and you end up with dizziness. And it can damage it on one side, it can damage it on both sides. The frustrating thing about this is that a lot of times when you get that hair cell damage, the results, first of all, are irreversible, and you can only make a certain amount of gains. So here's where they are, here's 100%. I might be happy to get them to this point, but usually with that hair cell damage, we're not going to get them up to 100%. And you should make the person aware ahead of time. Look, I can try to make you better than you were. I don't know if we're going to get to 100% because of these medications. And a lot of times the patient is aware of that. These medications doctors do not like to use anymore because they're known to be ototoxic, but occasionally you run into a situation. I've seen a patient where this happens. They had a particular infection that other antibiotics just were not working. And the doctor said, well, you can either let this infection spread and potentially die as a result of it, or we can try this ototoxic medication, and there's a good likelihood it will cause you to have some dizziness afterward. And of course, the person's going to take that route because you don't want to die, right? And it's ototoxic, they have hair cell damage. It was the lesser of two evils. But again, anybody with a positive head thrust test and a hypofunction, you treat the same way, as we're getting to toward the end of this video. Now, I don't want to get too much into the hairy details of what's going on mechanistically with a hypofunction, but I will give you a criminally simplified explanation of what's happening. Okay, so let's use the example of when I turn my head left and keep my eyes stable on that object. Turn my head left. Let's say to the standard that they have probably somewhere in France, I think it is, the international standard with degrees, this is exactly 45 degrees to the left. Okay. Now, when I rotate my head to the left vestibular apparatus is the one that's inhibited. So let's say from its perspective, it should be saying negative 45 degrees. Positive 45 on the right, negative 45 on the left, but it's hypofunctioning. It's not functioning up to par. So instead of negative 45, it's only saying negative 44. Okay? It's basically not quite as negative as it ought to be, negative 44. Now I've got a mismatch between the two ears. And what happens is that the eyes no longer have correct sequencing of the medial and lateral rectus muscles. And so what tends to happen is when I quickly rotate my head this way, there's a delay in my eyes going to the object to maintain gaze stability. And so then when I'm moving all around during the day, my eyes just cannot fixate on an object and it produces dizziness. That is a criminally oversimplified explanation of what is going on during a hypofunction. Now, hopefully this video gave you a good, thorough understanding on the theory and testing of gaze instability and hypofunctions. Please make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification button for notifications for all videos in the future. Thank you so much.